Another week in the NFL schedule is nearly complete, and Contending Football is back in the huddle. We're taking your phone calls at 855-908-5668 and reacting to the biggest stories from this week's games. Tweet us now at The Contender and catch the show after the fact as a podcast. Simulcasting on the Colorcast app and The Contender, this is Contending Football.
All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome into Week 6 of the NFL season. I am James Flippin, hosting with you here on the Contender, Contending Football, as we roll along on a beautiful October 17th afternoon here on the East Coast. And we're ready to get you started here with your football Sunday, although chances are you already did get started, given there's a game underway as we speak out in London town. The Jacksonville Jaguars and the Miami Dolphins squared away out there in the UK. And a big fourth stop for the Miami Dolphins defense just now. The Jaguars offense continues to really just not have much going for it. And Trevor Lawrence, kind of tough sledding for him so far as a rookie QB. I don't think he's gone over 200 yards passing today. And obviously that Dolphins defense, which maybe we expected something out of at the start of the year, has not really been anything incredible up until this point. Phone lines are open, 855-908-5668, 855-908-5668. We'll take you right up until the 1 o'clock games. We'll talk about the 4 o'clock slate of games, maybe even have some time to talk about the Sunday night football game between those Seahawks and those Pittsburgh Steelers. So the game of the week we're watching this week is going to be Baltimore Ravens, LA Chargers. We'll get into a breakdown of that game, but really, if you like good young quarterback play, you couldn't ask for more when it comes to Lamar Jackson and Justin Herbert squaring off. We will check in on Jaguars-Dolphins. Like I just alluded to, a big fourth down stop for those Miami Dolphins, and they now have the ball with 12 and a half minutes to play and clicking as Miami leads 17-13. The first game back for Tua Tagovailoa after his injury, and it hasn't necessarily made a huge impact for those Miami Dolphins who, again, they're actually losing right now, 17-13. I thought I had that a little bit mixed up. I thought maybe the Dolphins were leading, but no, actually, Lawrence, who we alluded to, did hit on a 25-yard touchdown pass to Marvin Jones Jr. earlier, former Detroit Lion. And we'll see if these Jaguars are able to move the ball and salt away the clock, as they do have a 4-point lead. So we'll check in on that game as we go. Like I said, want to talk Ravens-Chargers. Plenty of good games to get into today. Packers-Bears, always a classic, and of course something that our Chicago fan base is watching very closely. Justin Fields, his continued career arc, his first time going up against Green Bay, his first time going up against Aaron Rodgers, and obviously for Bears fans, they hope the start of a new era when it comes to that particular rivalry. We'll also talk about, obviously, Vikings and Panthers. We'll talk Bengals-Lions, Texans-Colts, and maybe, like I said, we'll get into those 4 o'clock games in more detail. Chiefs and WFT, the other 1 o'clock game we didn't mention. So get in on the phones if you want. Let me know what you're thinking about here today. If there's a game that you're trying to, think about before putting in the bet on your app, if there's something of a last-minute variety decision when it comes to fantasy football, get in on the phones on that. Not much of an expert, I'll put it to you that way. I think my teams right now are 2-3, 2-3, 3-2. So do with that what you will. I'm kind of a little bit of both. Right near 500. So you could do worse. All right, 855-908-5668. One thing I did want to get into before we actually kind of talk individual game breakdowns and all that kind of thing is the ongoing fallout that's resulted from these leaked league emails. And obviously the most prominent aspect of it is the fact that John Gruden, formerly Raiders head coach twice, has lost his job now. He resigned as head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. And, I find myself pretty conflicted about the whole thing. I think that there's probably a number of people that kind of feel the same way. We live in a world where there's really no such thing almost as private communication. The digital era, the Freedom of Information Act, the fact that digital records exist somewhere, if you're able to access them and you know how, there's really no such thing as a private conversation, especially on the internet. And you can kind of get into the nitty gritty of, what it means to be offline and trying to have a private conversation. Sometimes that seems precarious these days also. But in terms of the emails that are sent and anything that's questionable, I think anybody who kind of is of the modern age and knows the way things work, you look at somebody a little bit suspect. Like, you got to know better than to put something on email. And yet there's another part of me, having said all that, that feels like it's very sad and very detrimental to society that there is no such thing as a private conversation anymore. Not everybody's going to like everybody. Not everybody's going to be your friend. There's some people who look at a certain person, certain type of person, and they have a problem with them. As shocking as that may be to some people. So I don't necessarily appreciate the reality where you can't have a private conversation with somebody and where everything that you might write online or via email is basically, in essence, eventually get there at some point, public knowledge. And yet I do think that there has to be some responsibility taken for knowing that that's kind of the world we live in now. So when it comes to John Gruden emailing, and I'll be honest with you, I think the weird part about this is, and I don't really care enough maybe to go look for them if they're out there. Maybe they are. I haven't read the actual emails. So I know Gruden had something to say about, female officials. Supposedly, like I said, I haven't read them. He was judgmental of Roger Goodell in terms of alleged pressure that may have been put on Jeff Fisher to draft Michael Sam, the first out gay player in the NFL. And then, of course, the real hammer, the one that chances are you're not getting up from in this day and age, is the fact that Gruden allegedly used the F word for gay people. So, again, double-edged sword. I think Gruden has to know better than that. There's also something to be lamented in terms of the fact that you can't have a private conversation. And yet, I also think there's a lot that isn't talked about that some people are talking about. And if you listen to our airwaves here on The Contender, there's plenty of people talking about it. Bill Rowland, our DC host that does a show for us on Tuesday morning. And again, download the Contender app, the Contender with a K. You can get all this content for free, commercial-free sports talk all the time, 24/7. Bill Rowland's been talking about this. The bizarre aspect of this, and maybe it's not that bizarre if you know anything about the NFL, is that all these Gruden emails trace back to the WFT investigation. Washington football team was supposed to be investigated for allegedly untoward conduct, I should say. Washington football team was being looked at sideways as potentially doing bad things. And so the emails between Bruce Allen, former front office executive for Washington football, who at the time were, the Redskins, if we can even, let's just stay away from all that. But anyway, the emails between Bruce Allen and John Gruden, Bruce Allen working for Washington's front office at the time, John Gruden was not in the league. John Gruden was working as a broadcaster for ESPN. So it's weird to me that the organization, right? And maybe I say this kind of as a Mets fan, that, and not to confuse the two with the two different sports, but as a Mets fan that knows it would never work out this way for them. It's bizarre how WFT is kind of like free of any consequence with this whole situation. There was topless photos of cheerleaders being emailed back and forth. Bruce Allen obviously was a front office executive for them at the time when these emails were exchanged. So you would think that WFT bears some kind of responsibility. Apparently not. And as far as Gruden goes, 2010, there's a lot of people that have talked about this whole Gruden situation, and they've said, well, the reason why Gruden should be absolutely disgraced, dragged through the streets, shouting shame as you push him down the hill towards retirement, never to be seen from again. Take him out of the Ring of Honor in Tampa Bay, by the way. Keyshawn Johnson on air saying, this guy's been a bum. I always knew the fraud. Oh, okay, Keyshawn Johnson, because you said that, You said that when he got hired in Las Vegas, at least? Keyshawn Johnson, did you at least have anything to say negatively? And maybe he did. I mean, I'm not paying attention to that show that he does. I didn't even know he had a show. But Keyshawn Johnson is going to kick John Gruden while he's down to try to get a little bump on his ESPN show ratings. Says he's always been a bum. Like Keyshawn Johnson, you had the big time rookie season, or maybe first two, with the New York Jets. And, again, had some stats that you put up as far as being a receiver for the rest of your career. But you weren't doing anything big in Tampa Bay. One of the lasting legacies for you is that you actually did get a Super Bowl ring as part of that team. And then you're going to say, oh, this guy's not worth crap? I really, honestly, 9 times out of 10, any of these former athletes that get into broadcasting, I've got no use for it whatsoever. Zero. It's rare the instance where you have a guy like Troy Aikman who, his Cowboys bias notwithstanding, which does absolutely, it makes me sick as a Giants fan whenever they play each other and he's doing the game. But Troy Aikman adds something to the broadcast. He adds a lot, actually. I don't even have to tell you the other more recent Cowboys quarterback, Tony Romo, who's getting paid out the wazoo to do it now because of that. He adds a lot to the broadcast. But again, like I said, 9 times out of 10, it's sort of like very cliche, heard it all before analysis that they give. Or it's something really desperately hot takey to try to get themselves relevant again. Think Tiki Barber saying that Eli Manning, wasn't a leader or whatever. And then he goes out and wins a Super Bowl. Thanks, Tiki. Now everybody has to boo. I mean, I don't, but everybody boos you now when you come out at MetLife Stadium. Because you just had to spike that. You just had to start off that media career, right, Tiki? And in Keyshawn Johnson's case, John Gruden, all his dirty laundry's been aired right now. People know who he is. Big story right now. Everybody's talking about John Gruden. I'm going to double down and let you know, I always hated the guy. Wow. What a brave, what an amazing stance, Keyshawn Johnson. Just amazing. I mean, you're really going out on a limb there saying that John Gruden has, that he should be looked at as like a fraud or something bad. I mean, who's going to say anything? I mean, the guy just got fired. All this heat coming down on him in like the cancel culture era. And you think that somebody's going to step up and look at, again, crossing over a different sport. Kyrie Irving decides he's not going to get the COVID vaccine. And you've got Jay Williams on ESPN defending his decision not to. And people are saying, oh, I hope you get in another motorcycle accident. Nice. Really nice. 855-908-5668. Get in on this discussion if you want to. 855-908-5668. You can also tweet us at The Contender. That's The Contender with a K. And then download our app if you're from Washington, D.C., or if you're from Chicago, or if you're into any of the teams that play in those cities. You're going to want to check us out. On Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we broadcast Chicago content. Tuesday, Thursday, we do D.C. Saturday as well is D.C. And then we kind of get more of our national stuff going most of the time on Sundays, just like how we're here with you the next 45 minutes covering week 6 in the NFL. and doing a little bit about the Gruden thing. But again, there's another aspect of the John Gruden story that doesn't really sit well with me and is very bizarre. And it goes beyond just the fact that it's private emails from 10 years ago. Oh, that's what I wanted to say, by the way. John Gruden was not a coach back then. He was working for ESPN. So John Gruden was a coach with the Raiders, was, traded in essence to Tampa Bay to become their head coach. Everybody wants to get on him because he took Tony Dungy's team and won that Super Bowl down there in Florida. But he did it. He did win. He's a Super Bowl winning coach. It comes to an end in Tampa Bay, not so ceremoniously. He leaves, becomes a broadcaster. That 2010 period, a lot closer to his time as a broadcaster, by the way. Or I'm sorry, a lot closer to his, getting fired as a head coach than when he got rehired to restart this new Raiders era. And, getting yourself into the Las Vegas era. So my point in what I'm alluding to here is, can a guy change? Can people go through any personal growth? Who's to say that in his time as a broadcaster, working with maybe former players on a different level, on more of a peer-to-peer level? And I'm making everything up here. I have no idea what John Gruden is like or what he went through over the last 10 years. I have no idea. But can someone change? I mean, why does the reality of 2010 have to be the current reality? And a lot of people have said, oh, well, that we got to get rid of John Gruden, got to get rid of him, ipso facto, cancel him, because 2010, that's not that long ago. The world hasn't changed really much. So we have to ascribe the same standard to John Gruden right now that we do, from his emails 2010, 10 years, that's not long enough. The world hasn't changed enough. Because, people would say, oh, if it was 30, 40 years ago, there'd be some people who say, well, come on, he was what, 20 years old? He was this, he was that. Come on. But since it's 2010, they say, no, that the statute of limitations basically is still open on cancellation. But my point is, and this is maybe a little bit of an extreme example, but just kind of bear with me on it. If somebody gets, knocked for holding up a convenience store and they get sent upstate for 5 years, they do their bid and they come back, right? Are they supposed to just kind of live the rest of their life as nothing but a con, never have another chance at redemption, whatever they did 5 years ago? And that's somebody who, actually committed a crime. And then they come back. How do you look at that personally? And that's up to you. But John Gruden, 10 years ago, says some questionable things on email in a private setting that, maybe what he was saying was jocular in nature. Again, I don't know. I don't really know. Was he messing around and being a bit of a brute and kind of saying some inappropriate things and being mean, judgmental, nasty, bigoted, racist, whatever term you prefer for that? Was he being that? Was he kind of trying to be funny and trying to have a loose exchange, or was he really expressing hate? I don't know. Was that even considered? Is that considered ever? Usually not. But 10 years, how does somebody change? Was there something in how John Gruden changed that made him interested in coaching again, or that made him more attractive as a head coach? You always heard his name kind of bandied about when it came to, head coaching vacancies. So it's not like he wasn't in desire as a head coaching candidate. You could never really go that far. But how did he change or grow in 10 years' time? And then the other aspect that I alluded to, and we'll start getting into some of the games here this week as we check in on Dolphins-Jaguars. Looks like they're reviewing a play that may or may not have been a reception. Looks like a catch to me. Who is that, Gaskin or Ahmed? Gaskin. pass across the middle, right at midfield, and Gaskin, it looks like he made the catch. They're kind of trying to figure that out, it looks like, as time winds down in the NFL's game out there in London for this week. It's 4th and 1, Miami now leading 20-17. And big time play here with Miami up by a field goal. It's 4th and 1, so we'll keep you updated on that. But the weird aspect of the Gruden thing, just, other than everything we've talked about up until this point, is that there's this labor war union negotiation undercutting to it. And I don't really know anything about this aspect of it. I'll just be honest with you. I'm going to throw that out there at the beginning, that I'm not going to shed any light on the situation here. You, the listener, may know more about this than I do. I'm just pointing it out in case you don't know that there was a whole, DeMaurice Smith is the head of the players union. And the league, allegedly, the NFL, Park Avenue, they like negotiating with him. So goes the narrative. So goes the theory that he is, I guess, seen in the NFL, seen by the NFL as an easier mark when it comes to negotiation than maybe some of the other people they've had to deal with in the past. And, in all these major sports, anytime a collective bargaining agreement is coming up, and it's always on the horizon, and let's see what happens here in this game.
Complete the process of the catch.
Well, that's what Gene just said.
Incomplete pass.
Ruled an incomplete pass on the field, and they upheld that on the review. So Myles Gaskin does not make the catch, and it remains 4th and 1, and a big possession here, like I said, coming up in this NFL game here between the Jacksonville Jaguars and Miami Dolphins. That's being played in London, and that's why it's being played this early. It started at 9:30 on the East Coast. 855-908-5668. The phone lines are open. 855-908-5668. So why I mentioned the DeMaurice Smith and John Gruden thing is that was the first email that came out. That was the first leaked email that John Gruden supposedly said DeMaurice Smith has rubber lips like Michelin tires, which, then the initial accusation was that Gruden was being racist in saying that because he was making a comment supposedly about Smith having large lips. But then some players came out that know Gruden, and they said, well, wait a second. He's used the phrase rubber lips for a very long time to sort of indicate somebody who is, fast talking, talking smack, or, talking out of their ass, doesn't talking too much. It doesn't lips moving, but not a lot happening. That type of thing, that type of thing that you say about somebody. So rubber lips, people said, oh, it was racist, but then kind of the narrative came out, well, maybe not, because so many people came to his defense. Why did that email come out first? If it eventually, comes out that Gruden is saying, the F word for gay people, and also saying that female cheerleader thing that he supposedly said, or I guess the topless photo, or, something about Michael Sam and whether or not he should or shouldn't have been drafted. Those are juicier in the modern parlance of, whether or not you're going to cancel somebody. So why the DeMaurice Smith one? Why did that come out first? Controversy in London right now, by the way. They're trying to figure out whether or not the Jacksonville player, whether the punt skimmed off his fingers, which the resulting play would have been a recovery for a touchdown by Mac Hollins of I think that's Mac Hollins anyway. It's Hollins of Miami. Did this bouncing punt nick off the fingers of the Jacksonville punt returner? I think it's going to be way too close to call on the challenge, but one of those bouncing punts that you always try to, as a return man, kind of get away from, but you can't, not always so easy. So anyway, they're going to say that it did not hit the punt returner. Jacksonville will have a chance here with the ball to drive, or are they challenging it now? I can't even, it's hard to follow a football game sometimes without the sound on. Anyway, look into it further if you're interested in that kind of thing. But the weird aspect of this NFL John Gruden is that there's some labor negotiation undercurrent to it. And I don't know if they were trying to look out DeMaurice Smith, kind of make him happy by going after Gruden. Maybe they've got an axe to grind, the two of them, or something like that. That I wouldn't necessarily know as much about, but it's definitely an interesting subplot of the whole thing. 855-908-5668. My name is James Flippin, and you can follow me on Twitter at Jamadrop. That's JAMADROP. You can also check out The Contender on Twitter. That's The Contender with a K. And then download our app for free sports talk, 24/7, commercial free. We're always doing different aspects of sports coverage, but it's DC and Chicago sports primarily. So if you're in those markets, fan of the Bears, fans of WFT, you'll want to check us out. Game of the week that we're identifying this week is Ravens-Chargers. And obviously the Ravens coming off that incredible win last week. Really, both teams were involved in incredible games, high-scoring, offensive shootout type games, with the Chargers having beat the Browns, and then the Ravens having survived in OT against the Colts. Two of the league's best young QBs here going head-to-head. And Lamar Jackson, who you probably know more about, kind of seemingly is taking his game to another level with his ability to be a passer. And, last year was kind of tough for Jackson in that respect. Maybe not as many weapons or people that were a little bit banged up. I know Hollywood Brown had him on my fantasy team. He was kind of not doing much last year. Andrews, for whatever reason, wasn't doing much last year. But the Ravens offense has really kind of come alive. And Lamar Jackson and that whole unit kind of looking more like they did a couple years ago. Justin Herbert, who coming off a tremendous rookie year, has really hit the ground running, hasn't stopped producing at all. He's going to have a challenge today with his top receiver, Mike Williams, inactive. And he is LA's leading receiver this year, kind of the thing changing in the guard a little bit, maybe with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen getting a little bit older. But both these quarterbacks do it differently. Obviously, Herbert, more of a strict passing threat, although he can run a little bit. Lamar Jackson just absolutely electrifying with the ball in his hands as a rusher. But like I said, taking his passing game to the next level. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in this particular game. Baltimore is, hosting. So they're actually the favorites by just a field goal. And both teams come in at 4-1. The Chargers, finally have Austin Eckler kind of back and healthy and doing what he does. And maybe they'll be able to kind of lean on him with Mike Williams out today. But it should be interesting because, again, like I said, both these teams increasingly are defined by their young quarterback. And for the Ravens, this whole season that we're seeing so far out of Lamar, he is maybe making them think twice about some of the chatter you heard this offseason. And the two sides have had contract renegotiation talk. There's, I think, all offseason. And the Lamar Jackson thing is weird, too, because I'm pretty sure he's his own agent, or maybe his mom is his agent or something like that. So he's trying to negotiate a big-time deal, as he is wont to do. And, of course, former league MVP, franchise quarterback, the whole thing. But the Ravens kind of floated it out there, and who knows if it's just a negotiating contact. You never negotiating tactic. You never know. But they were like, well, we're the Ravens army, and that's kind of just how we are. We plug and play so well. Next man up, next draftee up. Free agent plug, whoever it may be. We'll figure it out. We could do that at quarterback. Maybe we will. Now, they ended up going in a different direction in the draft that maybe took away from some of that speculation, because it's not like they got a Justin Fields. They ended up taking Bateman out of Minnesota, who I think is going to be active today, the rookie wide receiver, giving Jackson just another weapon to play with there. But, Lamar Jackson, as he kind of works his way towards a new contract, Justin Herbert, as he continues his ascension as one of the league's best young QBs. Both teams coming in at 4-1, playing in Baltimore, 1:00. Always tougher for an LA team to come to the East Coast and all that kind of thing. So maybe that's a factor, but that should be a very good game. And with the Ravens favored by, field goals straight up. It's basically a pick 'em, whoever you think is going to win there. Packers Bears, always a classic. One of the NFL's best rivalries, been very one-sided by and large, and we know that. Chicago Bears fans are hoping that they finally have their franchise QB, and Aaron Rodgers not getting any younger, still kind of unclear as to what his status is with the front office there and how he feels about them and what that lingering situation is or isn't. They certainly haven't figured out the Jeopardy thing yet. You know what I mean? There's no definitive host for Jeopardy, so Rodgers could always kind of revisit that aspect of things. But Packers Bears, you always have to check out. And Justin Fields started playing better last week. Maybe that situation is kind of solidifying itself. Bears are 3-2. They win this game at home in Soldier Field. They've got an identical record to the Packers. So this has the potential to kind of be one of those upending games where you change things a little bit. And we'll talk about this game a little bit later. But if the Vikings can get back to 500 against the Panthers team that just had an awful loss to the Eagles last week, anything is possible, as Kevin Garnett says. So Packers at 4-1. They've already won a couple of games on the road. Aaron Rodgers continuing to do his thing. Aaron Jones, Devontae Adams, the triumvirate. They're all healthy. They're all kind of just making it go. And the Bears are going to have their hands full in terms of slowing that down. But, the Bears have a veteran defense. They've lost some guys they did in the offseason to maybe, put their secondary in question. But that's going to be a big game for them. And with the Packers favored by 5.5 points, basically the question is whether or not you think that they're going to, if the Bears are going to hang around and then lose by a field goal or something like that. But, that sounds about right to me. I think you'd expect the Packers to win this pretty easily. But again, is Justin Fields going to be up to the challenge? That'll be fun to watch. This is the first week in the NFL with buys, so it is a shorter schedule. Not quite as many games. If you're a fantasy football player, you're well aware of that because there's some teams that you have players from that aren't options this week. The 49ers are on the bye. The Jets are on the bye. Saints are on the bye. So, you're checking that if you got your fantasy lineups to set. But Vikings and Panthers, speaking of fantasy, we know that Dalvin Cook is active. He's been, dealing with an ankle and kind of trying to get in the lineup, get back to that, workload that he had historically and also maybe earlier in the season. But two teams here in Vikings Panthers trying to stay relevant. The Panthers had a really nice start to the season. Their defense, we know, is really their calling card. The Vikings kind of feel like a team that is trying to figure out its identity. I should say Dalvin Cook feeding him and making everything go through really is supposed to be their identity. That may, as much as anything, kind of make sense and explain why they felt like a sort of tough to define team up until this point. Minnesota is favored by 2 points in this one, so Vegas is expecting a close game down there in Charlotte. And the Vikings kind of feel like they have a little bit of momentum right now. They're trying to get back into that NFC North, and you would think pulling for the Bears in that Packers game so that they can kind of get closer. The Panthers, I don't know what to say there because their defense is very strong. Christian McCaffrey has now been put on injured reserve officially, so he's going to be out for at least another couple weeks. And they're leaning on Chuba Hubbard or is it Chuba or Chuba? I don't actually know how to say his name, at running back. And, DJ Moore continues to establish himself as a number one receiver for Carolina. But Sam Darnold, I expected more out of him last week against the Eagles defense that, hasn't really impressed at all. And he was picked off 3 times and just kind of never really seemed in sorts, really struggled throughout the majority of that game. So it'll be interesting to see if he bounces back against a Vikings defense that, certainly you're not writing home about, but it's not a bad unit there. Again, the Vikings have been up and down. Dalvin Cook is active. We'll see how healthy he is. How many carries is he going to get? Both these teams are trying to find their footing offensively, kind of establish high-profile, generally unhealthy running backs with Christian McCaffrey's issues and obviously Dalvin Cook. But, one thing that I did want to mention, and I think this particular game connects into it, in that depending on who you listen to and what player you're talking about, there's a narrative out there that certain running backs can't stay healthy. As a Giants fan, maybe I'm a little bit sensitive to that because you hear it all the time about Saquon Barkley, for example. Saquon Barkley can't stay healthy. And if you look at the injury report around the league, and if you key in on some of the big names at running back, and some of them maybe aren't even as big names, but whatever, you get the point. Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon, Josh Jacobs, Antonio Gibson, Chris Carson, Melvin Gordon, Damian Harris, David Montgomery, Raheem Mostert, Saquon Barkley. These are all running backs who have been banged up throughout the year in some way, shape, or form. Number one backs, basically. So it's much more accurate. And to me, the narrative kind of should be that running backs can't stay healthy in the NFL. And you say it that way, it's kind of boring, right? It's like, yeah, well, we know that. We know that, okay? There's no bell cows anymore. It's all about running back by committee. And, you got to kind of try to manage guys' workloads and touches and all this kind of stuff. But, okay. And yet it is interesting and juicy to say, oh, this player, he's glass. Can't stay healthy. He stinks. Can't stay healthy. No use, no value as a running back. Always hurt. Well, again, say that about the entire position group then. Because that's the reality. And actually, I mentioned earlier just the Packers triumvirate of Rodgers, Adams, and Jones. Jones, he's a guy who pretty much always stays healthy. That's amazing to me. You do have to say that anytime a guy in the NFL largely avoids injury basically consistently, and I'm thinking back, Eli Manning, for example, as a Giants fan. That's something to be celebrated. That's something to be noted. And maybe it's sheer luck. I think there's plenty of guys that maybe, they haven't had major injury throughout their career. And you could probably say, oh, okay, they got lucky. But there's other guys that you see it is kind of a skill to a certain extent. Or maybe it's the talent or their chemistry, their body chemistry, ability to deal with pain, ability to recover fast from soft tissue injuries, whatever that may be. But, let's get rid of this narrative, really, by and large, that there's any running backs. You want to go back far enough. Of course, we can find names that even I would be hard-pressed to disagree on, like Fred Taylor. Fred Taylor could never stay healthy, and it sucked because he was such an incredible talent. Darren McFadden, by and large, just didn't have the ability to stay healthy, let's say, at the NFL level. But by and large, this notion that any given running back is glass and can't stay healthy, and come on, it's the entire position group. Again, the names I read already, Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, those were the top two fantasy picks at period. And they've barely been on the field this year. Antonio Gibson, he's got a shin fracture. Joe Mixon with a bad ankle. Saquon Barkley. These were all top running backs in terms of fantasy. David Montgomery, out who knows how long with his knee injury. Raheem Mostert. I said these guys already, but you get the point. Let's talk Bengals and Lions here as we continue through the schedule. DeAndre Swift has been banged up all year. He can't stay off the injury report. Great standout young running back for the Bengals, for the Lions, I should say. He can't stay healthy. Right? That's the narrative, right? Cincinnati comes in at 3-2. The Lions, another brutal last-second loss to knock them down to 0-5. Cincinnati favored by a field goal and a hook. We had a throat contusion for Cincinnati quarterback Joe Burrow last week. He had to go to the hospital after the game. That was kind of scary, but supposedly it was all, precautionary. Joe Mixon, who I mentioned before with his ankle, he's active today. And the word is that he's going to have a full workload, although we know that they have, both Chris Henry and Samaj Pirine that they can work in as secondary backs. And the Bengals defense has looked good so far. So this one, I like to point some of these games out. This game has the ability to go either way narrative-wise. Not so much for the Lions, because I think people are kind of already thinking, here we go again with them. And it's too bad because Dan Campbell, it's just tough anytime you're a first-year head coach and you're not getting any wins. It's just tough. These things start to mount, and then the locker room gets a little bit away from you. Hopefully not. We'll see. But the Bengals, this is a definite narrative game for them, because if they come away with a pretty nice, win to move to 4-2, take care of business against the Lions, all that kind of thing. Joe Burrow comes out of it healthy. Joe Mixon getting healthier, all that kind of stuff. Jamar Chase has looked great. Tyler Boyd, we know, absolutely solid. T. Higgins, maybe he's getting more healthy, all that kind of thing. Cincinnati feels like a team on the rise, and their defense, like I said, has been solid. If they come away here 4-2, you're going to start to hear even more buzz about them. But if they lose this game to fall back to 3-3, and the Lions get their first win of the year against Cincinnati, and obviously, Vegas expected it to be close with just the 3.5-point spread, then that's going to be a narrative in the opposite direction for Cincinnati. That you forget about their early successes and you wonder, what is it that is holding them back as a unit? And we'll have to see, because obviously the game itself would play out and you'd have to say after the fact, oh, maybe this defense not as good as we expected, or there's something wrong there with the offense, or are they not getting Mixon involved a lot? Does Mixon come out of the game because his ankle gets re-injured, all that kind of stuff? So definitely a narrative watch between the Bengals and Lions in terms of what direction that game goes in. Still some time to play with here as we get closer to the 1 o'clock kickoffs. The phone lines are open here, 855-908-5668. My name is James Flippin, and you can follow me on Twitter at Jamadrop, Jamadrop. Also, the Contender Twitter account is The Contender. I see all those as the show goes along, so if you want to tweet us there and let us know what you're thinking, please feel free to do that. But like I said, the phone lines are open, 855-908-5668, and we'd love it if you would download our app, The Contender, with a K, if you're listening on the web. You can download our app and take us with you. Texans, Colts, not the most attractive game on the ledger here. Texans and Colts both come in at 1-4. Just a brutal OT loss for the Colts last week against a good Ravens team. Carson Wentz continues to kind of feel like a placeholder there. With, the way the Colts are built, the, big offensive line and, Jonathan Taylor at running back, and, the defense was, kind of supposed to be a strength there. It just doesn't feel like the right fit with Carson Wentz. I feel like you want kind of more of just like a game manager there, or maybe a guy who is more of an RPO threat or something, which is weird because I always thought of Wentz as more of a rushing threat, but he's not really the one that I thought he was there in terms of he's only ran for over 250 yards in a season twice. I looked that up. And, I look at this game, Texans, Colts, 1-4 coming in. Going to sound crazy maybe to some, but I'd say give me Houston. It's a 10.5-point spread here, depending on what you're getting. But ESPN's line has it at 10.5. I'll take Houston. I mean, their quarterback, he's a rookie, Davis Mills out of Stanford. He played better last week against New England. The Colts just kind of, they have a lot of issues. Again, I'm not really sure if it's just the newness of Wentz and maybe the fact that he, was kind of hurt all preseason and didn't get as much of a chance to play, or I don't know. But they don't seem, they feel, the Colts feel like less than the sum of their parts. And Houston had kind of an inspired game last week against New England, so we'll see. But not much to speak of there. It's kind of just, if you're betting it, maybe you're interested. Can't even think of too many fantasy impacts unless you're kind of wondering, can Jonathan Taylor finally take a game over? Which he's done at times. Actually, Jonathan Taylor had a big week last week. Speaking of RPO, run pass option, I'd love to see more of that with Daniel Jones as we'll get into this Giants-Rams game here, one of the 1 o'clock games coming up on the East Coast. Actually, they'll be playing not far from where I'm sitting right now. I would love to see more of that with Daniel Jones. He is officially active, dealing with a concussion after last week's game against Dallas, so maybe they don't run the ball as much with Jones today. But, that's something to talk about, really. In terms of the modern NFL and the desire, by and large, the tendency to want to have a mobile quarterback, it's great when you have a running quarterback that's good about not taking hits. Like Aaron Rodgers, for example, is probably not even as much of a threat per se as Daniel Jones and Aaron Rodgers is older now too, so leave that out of it. But maybe Aaron Rodgers as a younger guy, for example, was always good about picking up, running first down on 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7 with man up coverage and his back. The defenders turn their back to the defense. Zip, he'll take that first down nice and easy. He was always good about that, but he's also very good, Aaron Rodgers and some of these other quarterbacks, about sliding. Russell Wilson, good example. Even though he's injured and had to have surgery, it was because he hit his hand on the helmet of the lineman. That's always a risk and kind of random. But, the running quarterback that is not good about taking hits, that's a problem. And that's kind of where Daniel Jones is right now and I hated that play call that he got hurt on. When you have the ball at the 1 yard line, don't have some play that's going to take things out wide and try to flank the defense. Just go right at it. You're 1 yard away. How many times have I seen the great Tom Brady take the snap on a keeper and put the ball over the goal line for a touchdown? Done. Over. No contact. Done. The frustrated defender is going to flip the ball out of the guy's hand after he's already crossed the plane. It's over. So running quarterbacks that take a hit, not a good thing. And that's where Daniel Jones is right now. So he's got to figure that out amongst the other things that he was being better about, not fumbling, not turning the ball over, this, that, the other thing, showed a lot in that Saints game, for example. Jones now is putting himself at risk too much as a rusher, and that's got to change. The Giants looking, unfortunately, like they're in line to get waxed at home. Some people have mentioned, it is a 10 a.m. start for an LA team, coming to the East Coast, their internal body clock. The 1 o'clock is actually 10 a.m. I'm not buying it. I always loved it. I mean, and again, I know there is some research to defend this. And the thing is, again, it's not like the Rams come in on Thursday and kind of get themselves acclimated. They flew in last night. So there is something to be said for their internal body clock and all that kind of thing. But come on, you think guys get up at 9 a.m. on a game day? And then, they got to work the cobwebs out by the time the 1 o'clock, have a second cup of coffee. Come on. So the Rams are touchdown favorites, 7.5, I guess, according to ESPN. And, that feels right. A 10-point loss for Giants with Jones playing, it's, Matthew Stafford's going to have a big day. Whether or not the Giants can kind of match wits with that offensively, I have yet to really see them play that kind of game under Jones. But crazier things have happened. They are getting Sterling Shepard back. For the Rams, they're kind of starting to come back to full strength. They've got, Henderson in the backfield, and, Cooper Kupp is having a big season for them outside. So, it's a tough matchup for the Giants. And I think the Rams, I've mentioned it before, they had the offseason of the league. Picking up Matthew Stafford, bringing him in to take that offense to the next level, and in essence, take the team to the next level. Amazing move. And I know the Rams don't have a first-round pick for another 20 years. That's less than ideal. But, sometimes you got to do what you got to do when it comes to getting that first-round quarterback. Kansas City Chiefs and Washington football team. The Kansas City Chiefs come in as 6.5-point favorites. Tyreek Hill is active for the Chiefs, and he had practiced towards the end of the week, so I guess that's not really that surprising, but I think he's got a quad. There was some question as to whether or not he was going to play. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is out, not playing after he got injured, so it'll be kind of a Darrell Williams, Jerick McKinnon combo for the Chiefs out of the backfield, but obviously we know that, for them, it's all about Mahomes, Kelsey, and Tyreek Hill with some, McCole Hardman sprinkled in for good measure. But this one kind of feels like it could be a shootout because the Kansas City defense has not been good. Taylor Heineke for Washington is not taking care of the football, that's for sure. But he has, shown the ability to put points up on the board and pick up big chunks of yardage. So this one feels like it could be a shootout. If maybe the points do get up into the 30s or something like that, then maybe that's where, WFT kind of struggles a little bit. Antonio Gibson, he is active. Terry McLaurin, he is active. So, what WFT does have their big weapons. Logan Thomas is hurt. So, that's a miss for them right now. But the fact that McLaurin and Gibson are at least playing, that's big for the WFT offense. And, look, what more can you say about the WFT defense? Coming this season, they were expected to be one of the league's premier units. You kind of counted on it. It was kind of like a given that they were going to be, as good as, like, for you talk about NFC East, as good as the Dallas Cowboys offense was going to be, that's as good as the WFT defense was going to be. And it just hasn't worked out. Dallas's offense, they're doing great, but WFT's defense, it's just like there's something missing there, and I don't know what it is. I think when you watch the games, it's hard to really know what it is. And things can be very difficult to put your finger on, period, with the NFL. The margin of error being so thin. A lot of what you hear of out of people who kind of regularly watch Washington's game very closely is they can't make the big stop. So what does that tell you? Maybe that their coverage is lacking a little bit. Maybe their secondary. And they did have a lot of their eggs in the one basket with their, defensive line. Chase Young, Jonathan Allen, Montez Sweat, these whole guys, getting after the quarterback at such a level of proficiency that you don't worry as much about the secondary. That era may have passed us by a little bit. And I'm not going to say that definitively because I'm not, an expert to that degree. But I just wonder, what the long-term reality is for NFL defenses. And are they going to focus less on rushing the passer and more on just flooding your roster with effective secondary guys? We've reached the final, by the way, in London as the 1-5 Jaguars defeat the 1-5 Dolphins 23-20. Game came down to the wire. I didn't actually see the rest of it because I was watching or hosting here with you, but I guess Lawrence must have driven them down the field to at least get in field goal range. Big day for Tua Tagovailoa coming back from the injured list. Jeez, 33 of 47, 329 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. So big day for Tua coming back. And you got to at least feel good about that if you're a Dolphins fan. I mean, awful to lose to the Jaguars, obviously, and in kind of brutal fashion, considering that you had the lead late. But, or I'm sorry, they didn't have the lead late. They had tied it up late. I had that whole score wrong at some point where I thought it was 17-13 the other way. But, at least if you're a Dolphins fan, you feel like maybe this is a sign that Tua was who we thought we had when we drafted him and took him in the first round. And the whole tank for Tua narrative, maybe that wasn't as crazy as it kind of felt like at the start of the year when you were entertaining the thought of bringing in, Deshaun Watson and all this kind of stuff. So the Dolphins drop a tough one. Big win for the Jags, by the way, with everything going on with Urban Meyer and all that kind of stuff. And maybe they can turn their season around. I don't know exactly what the stat line ended up like for Trevor Lawrence, but like I said, big day for Tua. Actually, Lawrence went over 300 yards passing too. So both guys have to feel pretty good about their day today, despite the fact that it's a long flight home for Miami, having dropped it. Both those guys obviously are hoping to be their team's quarterbacks for a long time, and their fans would be just happy with that if it worked out that way. All right, the 4:00 slate, we've got Cardinals and Browns. The Browns having just dropped a tough one, and then the controversy with Baker Mayfield's wife saying that like Cleveland fans don't appreciate him properly and all that he's done to change the culture there and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I don't know why that has to happen. You know what I mean? Like the team is on the rise. They haven't necessarily won every single game that their fan base would have liked up until this point. But, why are you causing problems early in the season? Still plenty of season ahead. Baker played well against the Chargers and all this kind of stuff. It's just, I don't know. Social media, what can you say? It just seems to cause problems. Because, it's not like, is Mayfield's wife like in media or something? Like, again, we go back to the Keyshawn Johnson, John Gruden thing. But like, what is she gaining out of poking the bear there? What is she gaining out of stirring the pot and raking the coals? The Cardinals, the NFL's remaining undefeated team, I should say, easy for me to say. They go out there, and that could be a really good game, actually, at 4:00. You want to watch, pick one of the games at 4 to watch. That could be it. We've got Patriots, Cowboys. I think most people expect the Cowboys to win that pretty easily. The Patriots have not been bad this year, but, Mac Jones has not made anybody forget Tom Brady. That's for sure. Maybe they've made them forget Cam Newton, but they haven't forgotten Tom Brady off Mac Jones. And the Cowboys defense has been really strong. And the Cowboys look like an absolute unit right now. As a Giants fan, I hate to admit it, but they look like one of those teams that's just faster, more aggressive, pushing guys around on offense. They've got two great running backs. Dak, league MVP type guy. All that talent on the outside from wide receiver perspective. The defense is finally coming together. I'm telling you, I hate to say it. I really, really hate to say it. But if there's any team that kind of looks like they're amongst the class of the NFC, it's easily the Dallas Cowboys right now. And then, Broncos, Raiders, that'll be an interesting game to watch because how are the Raiders going to react to the loss of their head coach? And, the Broncos have a lot to play for also because their season, having started out as promising as it did, has kind of started to slide the other direction a little bit. And, maybe some of their problems on offense are kind of rearing their ugly head. So both teams have a lot to play for. And then Sunday Night Football, just looking ahead, we'll be watching that one. We wait all night. We wait all day, right? That's what we do. We wait all day for Sunday Night Football. And in this case, it's the Seattle Seahawks and Pittsburgh Steelers. Would have been a matchup of veteran quarterbacks with Ben Roethlisberger still kicking there in Pittsburgh. But instead, it'll be, Geno Smith is a veteran quarterback, so he'll be going for the Seattle Seahawks. But Russell Wilson had to get the finger surgery. That's a nasty injury. You always hate to see that. It always, having played sports and injured your fingers, whether it's in baseball or something like that, any banging a helmet, oh man, that's just brutal. So you feel for Russell Wilson. He's hoping to get back sooner rather than later. Not a season ender for him, but we watch that one later tonight. This has been Contending Football. My name is James Flippin. Follow us on Twitter @The Contender and download our app.